Alright, day late, dollar short. Here it goes. Hello there, I'm Scotty, you're not. Time to talk about Scooby-Doo, The Mystery Begins. Yes, sir. So, I was gonna do this yesterday, but I got a case of the fuckets, and I just binge watched Marble Hornets all day long yesterday. It was something I was gonna start watching it yesterday morning, and then go into and I said to myself, okay, I wake up this morning, I'm gonna do that. Well, when I woke up, like I said, I'd been drinking last night. I woke up this morning, my stomach was a little icky. So I waited till my stomach subsided. Although, doing those two Scotty tries, probably not the best idea, but it's fine. I'm better now. So I basically watched more Marble Hornets, but like I was up till like 3 o'clock in the morning finishing it because I'd pay back and then I finished watching all it and then woke up and then now I watched Nightmire's videos on them where he explains them. And so that got done. I then was going to do this and then Big LT brought me the yolk pudding. So I did those, and then I already put this in when I decided to do those reviews because I just wanted to get those done. And then here we are, Scooby-Doo: The Mystery Begins, and I remember this. I was there when this came on. This came on. I had just gotten cable. It was around that time, and this was around the time the Cartoon Network was starting to go into live action shows like Dude, What Could Happen and Destroy, Build, Destroy, and that Out of Jimmy's Brain show or Out of Jimmy's Head, where it's live action with cartoons. And then this came along, a live action Scooby-Doo movie that they said was a prequel to the original series. Not only does not make any sense, especially if you watch the movie, there are reasons why it doesn't make any sense. Well, that can be the case. It doesn't even make sense if you say, oh, well, maybe they meant a prequel to the live action movies. It still doesn't make any sense. And those reasons are as follows. One, it obviously takes place in modern day. And it always confuses me. We're going to do a prequel. And the only ones that I think have really worked, Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning, because it actually takes place beforehand. But we're going to do a prequel to the original thing. But this clearly takes place in 2009. With the fashion sense, the music, everything. If this is supposed to be a prequel to the original, it would be in the 60s. It's not in the 60s. It'd be a pretty good idea, I remember when they announced it, I'm like, oh, are these going to do a live action version of the Black Knight Ghost? No. Because number two reason why this cannot be a prequel to anything else we've seen before, there are real ghosts in this movie. And we know that at least in the continuity, real ghosts don't come along in the animated world until like the 80s movies. But they don't really acknowledge that, in canon with the whole Scooby Gang until Zombie Island, where Fred's trying to, it's the gardener! It's real, and yeah, so real ghosts, real stuff, and it's really even weird when you get to Zombie Island where they say now the monsters are real, but they met the Boo Brothers, they went to the Ghoul School, the Reluctant Werewolf was a thing. There was real monsters before Zombie Island. People tend to forget that, but it happens. And the number three reason why this cannot be a prequel to any other pre-established Scooby-Doo lore is the characterizations of these characters are different from, except for Shaggy and maybe Daphne. But that segues us into talking about the characters. Shaggy, as played by Nick Pilatus, is probably the best character in the movie besides Scooby-Doo. Nick Pilatus is great as Shaggy. He has the mannerisms down, the voice, everything. He is fantastic. Frank Welker returns to voice Scooby, and he's pretty good too. Look, Nothing, not to say anything bad about Frank Welker. He's the man, he's the legend, whatever. All that stuff. But his Scooby-Doo voice, as of late, he sounds more like Old Man Scoob than an actual Scooby-Doo. Frank Welker's the man. He's done a million voices. He's one of those guys up there with Mel Blanc and Jim Cummings, where it's just like he's a legend, right? Put Jeff Bergman in there too. The man was Bug Bunny. But here, he hadn't lost his. He doesn't sound like Old Man Scoob. It sounds pretty good. Like he's not. It's not Neil Fanning from the other movies, but it works. What doesn't really work is how Scooby looks. As well, they try to make him look like he does in the movies, but this was a television budget, so he doesn't really look that good. And then there are the two characters that people might have the most problems with. First and foremost, Velma Dinkley is played by Hayley Kiyoko. Well, I've got to mention Daphne. Daphne, played by Kate Milton, who I think is a pretty decent Daphne. You know, it's the same character. She's rich. She has all, the stuff, but they make her a theater actress here in it. That works for Daphne. Daphne's always has a flair for the dramatic, so that works. Now let's get to the two characters people had a problem with. First is Velma Dinkley, played by Hayley Kiyoko. And just to throw it out there, she's Asian American. And honestly, this never bothered me. Because I don't know, Velma being Asian American is fine. Far from what they did to her in the Velma series. Not only did they make her Indian or Indonesian or whatever that Middle Eastern, but also a lesbian. Here she clearly has a crush on Fred, but Hayley Kiyoko was good in this role. But the reason why I never had a problem with her being Asian American is because they kind of already did that in a pup named Scooby-Doo. If you look at a pup named Scooby-Doo, Velma's mannerisms are very Japanese-like. The way she walks and moves. And it just, so it never really bugged me. If there's one character that could be Asian, Velma would work. And then there's Fred. And the big outcry, the big problem people had, he's not blonde. Well, obviously, Robbie and Mel didn't want to dye his hair or wear a wig like Fred Prinze Jr. did in the prior films. And that was my big gripe when I saw the trailer for this, when it came out on Cartoon Network, and I went, no, that's not Fred. He's not blonde. He's not blonde. And that's another big hang-up on how this can't be a prequel to any other thing, unless Fred dyes his hair blonde at some point. And I had a thought, because they announced that there's going to be a sequel. I'm like, if Fred shows up blonde here, he doesn't. It doesn't. And most likely because the actor didn't want to have to... A wig would have worked, although they do have a... I think it's in the second one. In the next one where they have a nod to that. But yeah, the core characters are done pretty well. The mystery, though. Mystery is two ghosts and a spooky phantom. They call him a ghost too, but he looks more like a phantom. And a spooky phantom invade Coolsville High and cause havoc. And so these four teens who have been accused of stuff and put in detention after not trying to figure out what's going on and save their school. Yes. So, yeah, the big thing is here they do a Breakfast Club thing. So, they first start off by ripping off the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films with Shaggy being late for the bus. Then he gets bullied and then can't find a seat to sit in. This is all very Spider-Man-esque. And then it's not that morning, it's the next morning that there's a scuffle back there, and when Vice Principal Grimes, played by Gary Chalk, another great voice actor, he was Optimus Primal on Beast Wars, shows up and asks what happened, the bus driver wrongly points to all four of those students when he should be pointing to the bully that started it all. But no, it's got to be those four so they can go to detention and bond over their love of mysteries, except for Shaggy. And those of you might go, well, Shaggy doesn't like mysteries? That's not right. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Shaggy wouldn't like mysteries. Are you crazy? Also, Scooby's backstory is that he was in a pet adoption. Nobody wanted him because there's a lot of Stargate actors on this. Yeah, Gary Chalk was a Russian colonel or general on the Stargate series. I think he was on both. The guy who was going to adopt was I think he was the original Kowalski. Yeah, in the Stargate movie. And then the principal, I think, was a member of the Jedi in Stargate Atlantis. I remember him being a villain there, which is unfortunate because a lot of people say that the guy who behind the Phantom Menace was responsible for this is very obvious. And I never got that until I watched it now, and I'm like, once I realized who the actor was, I'm like, yeah. And it doesn't help that they give away the motivation in the guy's first scene where he shows, he talks to Shaggy about so Shaggy falls into a trash can and ends up in the principal's office where he talks to him about philately, which is stamp collecting. Now, far be it from me to say anything bad about stamp collecting, but I never saw the point. I used to collect rocks when I was 8. I do have one rock left from the collection, and that's because it's this big ass rock here. They used to keep my bedroom door open because my bedroom door used to shut on its own. Put that in front of it when I lived with my mom anyway. Now, I used it when the summer started. I was still sleeping in the bedroom, and I have a hard time sleeping with the door open. It's not that I'm afraid of the dark. It's the whole situation of, it's not the dark I'm afraid of, but what could be in the dark. You don't know. It's dark. You don't know what's out there. And so I had to get the fan in there and then have the door shut enough so that there's still air to go through. And the fan, I started turning the kitchen light, the overhead light on the stove on just to help out too. But then it got too hot to bear, so I started sleeping in the living room with the air conditioner on, which is much more comfortable. Anyway, yeah, but I use this rock to kind of keep the door steady. And so this guy, this principal, he shows a stamp with a misprint, the one-eyed deer thing. It's got one eye, a misprint. And that is the motivation. You figure it out. Because this phantom is after the time capsule that is hidden underneath the school, because we find out later that there was a big flood. It flooded all of Coolsville, and they built a new town on top of the old one. So yeah, literally there's another school underneath this one. How that works, I have no idea. Maybe it was like a sinkhole happened or something, but I don't think you can build on top of the sinkhole. I don't know. Coolsville is in California. That's actually, but yeah, so the mystery is on. I gotta figure out who is behind it. It's the principal. But they heavily go towards the librarian or the janitor, although those are dismissed as they're just grumpy school people. So it's between the vice principal and the principal. And am I the only one that sees the issue with the vice principal? The vice principal keeps usurping the principal. Every time the principal tries to say, well, you know what, we should just cancel school. No, the vice principal comes out, no. It is obviously these kids, and they should be in trouble. And the principal just lets it go. The principal is above the vice principal. The vice principal is basically an assistant principal. So, like in my school, it was the assistant principal, not the vice principal. The principal is above the vice principal. So no matter what the vice principal is saying, the principal should still be able to speak up and say, well, I'm the principal, so what I say goes, and we're closing the school. But if he did that, we have to keep extending this. And so there's just... Okay, so the first thing happens where they're in detention, and the ghosts show up and chase them into the school, right? Because we have to close the school, so it all happens. And conveniently, when this phantom shows up, the principal, who was there just a few minutes ago, is now gone. I noticed that this time. I'm like, wait a minute. Don't even make an attempt to show that he's still there. He's just not there. He was just there a second ago, and now he's gone. Same. Yeah. And, you know, the principal's like, okay, we should close the school. I was like, no. It's these kids. And good. They do this joke a couple times. Good news. You no longer have to sit detention because you're suspended. And they don't tell the parents, of course. And so Shaggy has to fake sick, and they all go to Shaggy's room in a basement, which is creepy enough. He makes Scooby snacks for the first time, but doesn't call it that. He doesn't have a name for him. He's got a bunch of stuff. Cocoa. We found out there's... Wait, he put cocoa in the Scooby snacks? Dogs can't have chocolate. I just thought of that. He put cocoa in the Scooby snacks. Dogs can't have chocolate. No wonder Scooby's not dead, for God's sake. But some of the food they put in their stomachs, they can survive chocolate. Sure. Anyway, I just read that they said there's cocoa powder in it. I'm like, wait, dogs can't have chocolate, or cocoa, or cacao, or whatever you want to call it. Can't have that. Maybe cocoa powder is chocolate, but it's very similar. You know, I wouldn't chance it. But their big leading suspect is Vice Principal Grimes. So they go back to the school in disguise to check the school out. Well, they're doing detective suspects, and they eliminate the librarian and the janitor. The librarian is just a grumpy old librarian, and the janitor is... Well, they don't really eliminate the librarian, but the janitor just wants to be in a dance contest. I guess he's wearing a cape and shit. But yeah. So they find this book, and they find out it was checked out by Vice Principal Grimes. But they go into school after nightfall, and that's when there's another problem with the ghosts chasing them. And Shaggy and Scooby get locked in a freezer because, of course, they went to the kitchen. They're found the next morning by Vice Principal Grimes. How he was able to find them is beyond me. I think that's supposed to kind of cue them in. Like, you're supposed to think, oh, he found them right away, so he knew they were there, which means he is the one behind it. But no, he's just one lucky son of a bitch. And he finds them. He's like, oh, good news. You are no longer suspended. You're expelled. Which you cannot do without the approval of the school board. And to mention, he's the vice principal and does not have that power. The principal does. And you still have to go through the school board, if I remember correctly. You can't just expel someone. You have to go through the school board. You know, there's more than just, you know, stuff. It's not that simple as they make it in TV shows and movies, folks. Well, I've never been suspended or expelled, but still. I've been in the ISS room. Not because I was in trouble. They had to put me in there to take a test. It was right next door to the classroom I had, and I had to go do a standardized test in that room, and it was a very quiet room. Very nice to get a test on. Wasn't an easy test though, but still. But I never got ISS, I just was in that room. I was a good boy, I never got in trouble. I don't know, narc, whatever. Yeah, so now they're expelled. So, they become convinced that Vice Principal Grimes is the one behind it, so they go to his house. This is where we find out that Shaggy was held back 2 times, and so he's technically, 18 at this point, and he has his driver's license. Or he'd be 17, I guess, because they're all not 15, they're all not 16 yet, I think they're all 15. They're supposed to be. I mean, I think Robbie Mel was 25, but I think they're all in their early 20s, but I think they're supposed to be 15. And then Shaggy is 17 then. He's going to be 16 to drive. He's got his license, but he just got his license. So he's older than them, which is a little iffy. Because Fred is the one that always drove. Shaggy did drive sometimes, but in the original series, it was always Fred. But we got Shaggy driving, so we're going to have a goofy driving montage. I do like when Freddy goes to get in the front in the passenger seat, and Scooby jumps and he goes, "Rock gun!" Made me laugh. Rock gun. Yes, they make fun of his R. Roast? Oh, ghost! The whole roast. Something they never did on the original show. They just understood what he said, but now they got to make jokes because it's 2009. But, yeah. So they go to the vice principal's house. Vice principal, I forgot his name. Gary Chalk. Literally, old spooky house. There's a sign that says old spooky house. Live up on Coolsville Mountain or whatever it's called. It's old spooky house, and they find evidence that he's in on it. But we find out later it was planted by the ghosts, who are also there, and scare them away by going into planes. Like, the ghosts earlier were in mannequin bodies. I get that because they're human-like. But planes? Come in. Anyway. Yeah, so they have figured out that he wants the time capsule. So they go back to the school and they find it's underneath the place. The Phantom shows up and they think it's Vice Principal Grimes until they find out that he has been kidnapped along with Scooby. And if they want Scooby, they got to get the Scooby back. They got to get the time capsule. And yeah, but of course there's a trap set. They catch the ghost, the Phantom. I think they reverse the spell so the ghosts are no longer... Well, Shaggy tries to reverse it, and because they give the illiterate one the spell book and tell him to read it. Not that Fred or Daphne or Velma, who's the smartest one, could read. No, the illiterate one. So he keeps summoning ghosts, and eventually they're able to reverse it. And then it is revealed that it is the Principal Deedle. Why? Because he wanted that misprint. That's why. Yeah. Okay. If you're going to have this scheme to get this misprint, don't reveal it to one of your students. I mean, I know you couldn't foreseen that this student would help him. But yeah. And then, of course, the students are heralded as heroes. And we get a tease like, oh, we're going to go our separate ways. And then they come back together. And yeah. And then we get the song. The song that's in the movie and then in the credits. A song that was heavily shown. The music video for was heavily shown on Never Get the Time. And that is You and I by Ann Arbor. It's a song that goes, without you, there's no reason for my story. And when I'm with you, we will always act this way. Forever, yeah, if we're together, we can make it better. That song, which I really like. Hey, that one song is better than the two musical sequences in the sequel, which I guess was only in the extended edition. I don't remember the TV version, but we will talk about this thing. Well, this is not that bad. It's not as good as the first one. I thought this was pretty good. Especially for something that I think was supposed to be. I have to agree with Goulash and Dr. Wolfyellow when they said that they think it could have been a pilot for live action series, but never went anywhere. By the way, the end of the movie, we go into a sequence where you would assume it's like the opening sequence for Scooby-Doo, with like callbacks to Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? But the song they play is, ooh, that's new Scooby-Doo, we're coming after you, we're gonna solve that mystery, which, this may be controversial, I think that's the best Scooby-Doo theme song. It's a banger, man. I got Boomerang now on my channels, and like last month or whatever, and I was watching it. Once new Scooby-Doo came on, and Groby and I were rocking out to that song, and it's my refrigerator. You pee on me? You hear that? Something my fridge is peeing. Hold on. What's peeing? No? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, and it's mixed with visuals of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And What's New Scooby-Doo. So it's very weird. And they paint the Mystery Machine and stuff. I don't know. But yeah, it's pretty good. So what are your thoughts on Scooby-Doo The Mystery Begins? Leave them comments. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I've been Scotty. We're going to talk about this one next. Well, and I have some words.